Hey everybody, thank you for joining me. This is episode 8. 8 of It Takes Balls to Knit the show. How cool is that? Love the fact that you're here, and I think you're going to love this episode. First of all, Joe is going to teach me how to crochet. So if you don't know how to crochet, you should come along and just learn. It's really, really fun. Joe's a fantastic teacher. She's actually the first guest teacher I've had on the show. Excellent. After that, I am going to eat my cake and have it too. You've always wanted to do that, didn't you? Well, now you actually can. If you want to know what I'm talking about, make sure you watch all of this. And then after that, I go to Reading and I have an amazing chat with my friend Felix. And it's so cool. She's such an interesting person. I couldn't put her in a category. So Felix, you have your category all to yourself. I don't even know what it's called yet. And I actually had to break it up into 2 episodes. So part 1 is now and part 2 will be in the next episode in 2 weeks. But enough of my chatting. Let's get this party started right now and get you going. Okay, thank you for joining me. This is episode 8 of It Takes Balls to Knit show. If this is your first episode and somebody sent you here to it, please do subscribe, and that way you'll get notifications when the new episodes come out, which is approximately every 10 days to 2 weeks, and I'm sure you're gonna love it. And if this isn't your first episode, I sure hope you've already subscribed. Okay, click the button below, subscribe, you'll get all the notifications. Now, we have a very special KnitU for you this time around. When I was in the UK, Joe taught me how to crochet, and it was so good. She's such a good instructor. I'm definitely going to get her back on the show. Maybe I'll get her to come to Vancouver. That'd be really cool. I know she wants that. Yeah, so we'll definitely get her back at some point. But for today, we're going to have her teach us the basics of crochet. And as a knitter, you definitely should know how to do this. It's a fantastic way to just improve your skills. Actually, it helps improve your knitting skills as well. And it's a step into learning how to knit continental style. So, Joe, why don't you take it away and show us how to crochet? Hello everybody, welcome to a very special edition of KnitU. I have with me Joe, and Joe, you're the editor of
Your Crochet and Knitting magazine.
Your Crochet and Knitting magazine. We are in Stockport, England. We're in Stockport, England, and Joe is going to show me how to use this guy. That's right, she's going to teach me how to crochet, right?
Yay!
Okay, now, I'm not really a total beginner, but I don't crochet that much. So how about we do like a simple chain and a single crochet?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Sounds good. Excellent. So tell me what to do.
Shall we start with a slip knot first?
Okay.
To kind of cast on your hook. So if you hold your working yarn in your right hand and the tail end in the other.
Okay, I got you.
So to do your slip knot, I mean everyone does this a slightly different way. I cross it over so it's a loop.
Okay.
Oops. And then reach through and pull the working yarn.
Oh, look at that. Now that is a cool way, because I've shown people how to do it, but doing it a different way, so that's fantastic.
Everyone has a way that works for
Yeah,
them.
and that's what I say.
That's
Everything
just
is different.
And then we're ready to go.
Okay.
So, make sure you're holding your yarn, very light knitting, holding your yarn in a way that's comfortable to you. You can get your tension right.
Okay.
And then we're going to put the yarn under the hook. That's it. And then pull it through that loop.
Oh, through the
loop
slip knot. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Pull it through, right?
Yeah. And again.
And that's a chain.
That's a chain.
So I imagine. So how many times do we do that?
Let's do 10 for a good
Let's
length.
do 10.
So we're just trying it out.
And it'll tell me how many to do for whatever I'm making?
Yeah, every pattern will start chain whatever number, or and it'll tell you if you need to add chains if you want to make obviously a bigger project, or how to adjust it depending on the size. Often for blankets it's given in one size, but you might want to make it bigger, or you might want to make it for a baby. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
4, 5. See, I'm used to being you
10.
and getting through. I'm only on 6.
Right, okay.
Oh, the teacher is being schooled. 9.
Well, maybe you should teach me knitting after. it's
Like, what if you didn't know how to knit?
Probably not as good as you, but okay. So yes, we have 10 chains on the hook.
Okay.
So we're going to just crochet back across those chains.
Alright.
Using did you say single crochet, or do you want to try a double crochet?
Why don't we try single
Single,
first?
okay.
That's where you'd start, right?
Yeah, it
You'd
is where
with
you'd
a single?
start, absolutely.
Okay, let's go with a single.
So if you count to the third loop from, not the one on the hook, but the third one from there.
Okay,
1, 2. In the third one, put your hook into that
So
loop.
that's 2. That's
So
not 3.
1, 2, and then into the third.
Oh, okay, I got you. So the 1 and 2 into the third,
Into
right?
the third. Yarn over your hook.
Yarn over.
Pull it through that chain.
And pull it through.
And then yarn over and pull your working yarn through both loops.
So I go yarn
Over
and pull it
all the way
through both of them.
Yep. And that is your
That's a single crochet. So now how do I count down? I imagine I continue going across that
Now
row.
you just go into the next one, yeah. So hook
The
into
next one, this one or this one?
Have a look. Yeah, that one here has got the stitch in it, so it's this one.
That one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just go
So yarn into your stitch, yarn over,
yarn over.
pull through, so you have 2 loops on your hook. Then yarn over, pull through 2 loops.
Pull through 2 loops. Hold on. Pull through 2 loops.
One thing I will say is if you are starting out, you've got quite a small hook there. It's worth getting a slightly bigger hook and a slightly bigger yarn, because you can see what you're doing, you can see the bits of the stitch that you need to go into and everything. It's harder to do it on a kind of finer yarn, so that's worth bearing in mind.
Okay.
So yeah, shall we carry along till the end of the row? So into the stitch,
And then
2
yarn
loops,
over.
yarn over, pull through 2.
Pull through 2. Okay, that's not so bad. 1. Go through there, yarn over, pull through that, yarn over again,
pull through
pull
2.
through 2. And that's a single crochet.
It is.
Okay, so now what's the difference between a single and a double? I'm probably
The
jumping
double
way ahead.
in the UK we have different terms, but for in the US and Canada, I believe.
Yes.
Then
Just say
single
North
crosses, North America. I'm sorry.
Right. No, that's fine. There's nothing to be sorry about.
So single, you just go straight into the stitch. Double, you wrap your yarn over first.
Oh, okay.
Then go into the stitch.
All right. Okay,
So
we'll
do you wanna
tackle
try
that after.
Okay, we'll do that on the next.
So I should have 10. If I
Oops.
chained 10 and I do this, but I skipped one in the beginning. I skipped
And what
two.
that did was at the beginning of the row gives you the height for the remaining stitches.
Ah, got you.
So often when you'll see a pattern, it'll say chain 150 plus 3, and that will be to take that into account.
I got you. And then you would actually chain through 150.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That'd be a big project.
Yeah. That's one for a long weekend.
Okay. I think I made a mistake. So,
well, the beauty of crochet is you can pull it back. Knitting is a little bit harder, isn't it?
It's harder. If you make a mistake, the great thing about crochet is that you can just undo the last stitch and redo it.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk us through how you do that?
Sure. So you can just take out your hook and pull gently, and as you can see, your last loop stays in the previous stitch. You can just hook back on and redo your stitch.
So you don't have to frog an entire row. Okay.
Hopefully not, though. So
I got it now. So
got it.
yarn over, pull through, yarn over. That term is similar in knitting, yarn over.
Yarn over. Oh yeah,
So I
you would say
imagine
yarn
they have-
round hook or... Yeah.
Right. So go through, yarn, pull through, yarn over,
And pull through too.
and pull through two.
So you've done
So
your
now-
first row,
My first row is in
and you should have 8 stitches. And the easiest way to count is
8, I do.
top.
I have 8, yay!
Top marks. Okay.
And now to go back, what
to
do we
go
do
back.
to go back?
Again, you've got to get the height so your stitches sit properly on the top.
So you what?
S-
So
so
the
you-
stitches.
yeah, you
okay.
get the height for the rest of your stitches. So you chain 1,
Okay.
like you did at the very beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and then turn your work round.
Just like in knitting. You
Yeah,
turn it around.
exactly.
And now we just repeat the process going
Just
back.
repeat the process. Yeah.
Okay. So I think right now what I want to do though is try that double.
The double. Okay.
So you say you put it, it's the same, but I just hook it first, like a yarn over first.
Yarn over first, then into the stitch. Yarn over.
Okay. I see what you mean about the fine needles and the fact that I'm not the best crocheter in the world.
Yeah, it's helpful with a slightly chunky one. So that's it, and then if you pull your yarn through that stitch, so now instead of the 2 for a single, you've got 3 on your hook.
3.
So you pull through 2 of those stitches, not all 3.
Okay.
And then yarn over again
Mm-hmm.
and pull through the second 2.
Wow. Okay. And that's just a different stitch.
That's just
to
a taller stitch.
Okay. So let's see if I can get this yarn over.
Yarn over. Into the stitch.
Into the stitch, yarn and pull it through.
Mm-hmm.
Yarn over, pull it through,
Pull through
2. Oops, I see it, but I grabbed some of this strand. I'm cheating, fudging.
Well, again, I think it's a bit easier with crochet to do.
Yeah. Then I yarn over,
Yarn over it and
I
pull
pull
through
through the
2.
2. Excellent. Cool. Well, you are a good teacher because I think I got that. Yarn over.
It's looking okay to
Through.
me.
Pull it. All right. Well, mine doesn't look as nice as yours, but I just need a little practice, I imagine.
Yeah, and the yarn is important. You know?
And the yarn is important.
I
Well, I will do
particularly
some with some chunky yarn, and I'll show you what it
Okay,
looks
keep me
like.
posted.
But this is cool. And so now you were saying before when we were talking about the magazine, you've got quite a few tips and techniques in that about crocheting in the magazine.
That's right, yeah.
Excellent. So people can find that, get more information about it.
Yeah, exactly. If we have introduced a new technique in one of the projects, we tend to have step-by-step photographs or a link to a video on our website. So yeah.
So from now, because you won't always be here to teach me, I would go there or other resources. Are there other resources?
Yeah. Oh, there's plenty of other resources, and our other magazines do that kind of thing too. But yeah, and obviously YouTube is always a winner.
Excellent. Well, guys, I'm a crocheter. Well, better crocheter than I was before. Thank you so much for showing me how to do this, and hopefully we'll get you on the show again doing some more. That'd be great.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
And well done.
I cannot tell you how much fun I had with Joanna there learning the crochet. Okay, like I said, I know how to crochet, but it was just great going over it with her. She is such an amazing instructor, don't you think so? Please, if you think she was a great instructor and you'd like to see her back, leave me some comments. She definitely will be back, I'm sure of that. But yeah, leave some comments. And also tell me what things you'd like to see in future segments of KnitU. Okay? All right. Now it's time to eat our cake and have it too. Now, what do I mean by that? I know you're guessing. Okay, so obviously everybody wants to eat their cake and have it. And as knitters, we love to have something handy when we're knitting. Like we'd like to knit and drink, as you saw in the last episode when we did the sip and knit. Now, I don't have a knit and eat segment, but if I did, this would be the perfect spot for it. We're going to go visit a yarn shop in Glasgow, and it's run by Artje Carl. And Artje's of German descent, and she has a really unique take on the yarn shop. We're going to go see the yarn cake in Glasgow. Now, it's a yarn shop. You got lots of yarn in cakes, and you have coffee and tea and sodas, but you also have cake. Now, just so you know, when they say cake over in the UK and in Europe, they're talking about dessert cake, not, just regular cakes. But you'll see right now. We're going to go see Artje at the yarn cake. Hey everybody, it's Mr. Hugs, and I'm here with another local yarn shop spotlight. And this isn't just a local yarn shop, this is a destination yarn shop. So if you ever find yourself in Glasgow, Scotland, you have to check out the yarn cake. Now, one of the really cool things about this shop, the reason why they're called the yarn cake, is they don't just have yarn, and it's not just in cakes, it's in skeins and balls and all that kind of stuff too, but they have desserts like coffee and cake. I'll get some cake later and show you, or we'll go up and show you later. But anyway, I'm gonna stop talking and we're gonna go in the shop and talk to the actual owner. Okay. So here we are, and why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
My name is Artje Carl, and I run the yarn cake in Glasgow.
Nice. And okay, first let's talk about where you are in Glasgow, because you're not right downtown.
We're not right in the centre of town. We're easy to get to from the centre of town. We're in the West End, which is kind of university quarter. We get a lot of students here. We get a lot of obviously academics here, things like that. And it's also the prettiest bit. As far as I'm concerned, it's the prettiest bit. Nice. We're right next to the Botanic Gardens, which are really beautiful on a nice day, totally worth a wander through. But yeah, we're super accessible via public transport from the city centre as well.
And driving, there's a fair bit of parking on the road.
There's a fair amount of parking. At the moment, most of it's free parking as well. I think we're going to get metered parking at some point.
Right.
But yeah, it's a predominantly residential area, so there's plenty of on-road parking.
And this strip, this street here has a whole bunch of different kinds of shops and that.
Yeah, it's actually a really lovely little street.
It's a nice little community of, like, you guys all
Totally.
seem to know each other.
Yeah, and I mean, you were here when we had the street festival as well, so you kind of see what we do. It's a really unusual little strip of shops because the units are so small. All of the shops are owned by sort of sole traders, or they're all small businesses. There's no chains here. So it's all little quirky independent shops. We've got a couple of really nice gift shops. We've got a couple of nice food places. And it's quite a lot of hairdressers and barbers for some reason. Quite a lot of cafes as well. But all the cafes are really different as well. So we send people to each other. You know, it doesn't feel like we're in competition so much. And yeah, and we've got a traders association, and we do events, and we do all kinds of things. And it's a real community. And the area itself, like the people who live here, there's really real community spirit as well. There's a lot that kind of goes on within the locale that we're then involved in. So, you know, we always give raffle prizes to the local schools and things like that. And it's a really lovely part of town. And this place occasionally gets likened to Cheers. It is, you know, the place where everybody knows your name. You know, I know most of my regulars, you know, and I will greet most of them by name. And I know what most of them take for their drinks and things like that because it's just a really good community.
Excellent. So how long have you been here?
8.5 years. We're going to have our 10th anniversary next year. Yeah. Opened October 2010.
Okay, so when is the 10th anniversary? When is that going to be?
10th anniversary is October 2020, and we may do something exciting for it.
The whole month? Or?
Well, probably no. The actual anniversary is the 23rd.
Okay.
The actual anniversary is the 23rd of October.
I'm trying to figure out my travel plans already because next year's filling up crazy. Anyway,
nice to be popular.
So October 2020.
Yeah.
Like a 10th anniversary, definitely gonna have something. You'll have stuff online as well.
If you go to our website, which is theyarncake.co.uk, that'll have all the details on it. And we're really active on social media as well, so we tend to have things on Facebook and Instagram. So whatever is your social media of preference, the details will be there. We do things throughout the year as well, not just for anniversary. So we have classes, we have knit nights, we have trunk shows, we have all sorts of things. So just keep an eye out and see what's happening.
Your knit nights are Thursday nights, right?
Knit nights are Thursdays from 6 till 9.
Turns out I might be around. We'll
interesting. Okay.
We'll see.
I won't be, but you know.
You won't be here?
I tend to not be here for knit nights, no.
Oh my gosh, how do you do that?
Somebody else does it for me. I have staff.
Nice. Oh, what are they? I'd like to get staff.
Staff's great. You have to pay them, but you know.
Oh, right. That would be a problem.
Yeah.
So, okay, the store itself, the yarn cake. Why are you the yarn cake? What's special about you?
Well, how long a story do you want? You can have the short version or the long version.
I can edit. So
right. The long version is that my background's architecture.
Nice.
And I've always done catering of some sort. So through university, I did a lot of waitressing and catering. I did a really cool internship in a food and drink magazine in my early 20s. So that's always been my kind of second passion, particularly the cake and dessert side of things. And then when we hit the recession, 2008, I lost my job along with everybody else. So there weren't really any job prospects for me in my official profession. And I spent a bit of time unemployed and then spent a bit of time doing jobs that really didn't enjoy. And then thought, well, what can I do? And I thought, well, I can do a cafe. I've run a cafe before. I can do the baking. I can do that sort of thing. But we're in Glasgow and there's a lot of competition. and you need something a bit unique. You can't just go, I bake really good cakes. You need to bring something else to the table. And I was sort of thinking out loud at my knitting group in a cafe, while we were also generally complaining about the lack of good yarn shops in the area. And it was one of those literal light bulb moments. I kind of sat there and went, guys, I've just thought of something. Tell me if this is crazy. And I thought, how about a knitting cafe? And everyone was like, yes, do it now. What do you need? So when's this cafe happening then? Come on then, And I did some market research, and the results were super positive. And I spent about 1.5 years working out whether it was feasible, and whether I had the guts to do it, and whether I had the gumption to do it. And I kept on going up to people and saying, so I've got this idea. Nobody else has done it before, so there must be a flaw. Yeah, and everyone was like, no, this seems like a really good idea. We don't see any obvious flaws. You should totally do it. And I was like, damn it, I'm going to have to do it.
Put it out there.
Yeah, well, this was it. And I kept on thinking somebody would go, well, actually, here's a reason, and that's probably why, and here's your overheads. But everyone was like, no, that would work. You should definitely do it. And then there was a period looking for the right unit, and then this kind of presented itself in quite an interesting way as well. And
did you always have the name in mind?
Yeah, that came pretty quickly. I think that was kind of one of the reasons where I was like, that's a really funny joke. If you're a knitter, we should totally do it.
You basically wanted to do the cafe, and you put yarn in there. It wasn't, you wanted to do a knitting store and put cakes in it.
Yeah, well, my expertise wasn't retail. I had to learn the retail side of it. But looking back at it now, I can't quite work out how I ever did anything else.
Right.
Because it suits me so well. So I'm glad I did it.
And you mentioned that this was during a knitting group that it came
Yeah.
on. So you were a knitter.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
how long
it was
have you
already...
been
I taught myself to knit when I turned 30. So,
big time. I taught myself to knit a little bit sooner than that, but as an adult as well.
So obviously 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't mean that. Don't tell me how long you've been there.
A while.
Yeah, that's what I say too. Excellent. So then you were a caterer, so you bake all the cakes?
We do everything in-house. We've got a teeny tiny kitchen upstairs in the teeny tiny shop. Yeah. And my background's German. So quite a lot of what we do has a kind of German influence or German style. So we do German style crumbles, so Streuselkuchen. We do Marmorkuchen. We do all kinds of things, and that's been proved to be really, really popular as well. I think partly because it's quite different to what you get in most cafes. So here, a lot of the cafes do very sweet things with a lot of icing and stuff like that, whereas the German baking, especially at this time of year in the summer, we do a lot with fruit. So we don't add a lot of extra sugar to it because we just kind of let the base ingredients speak for itself, and it makes a nice change.
Nice, excellent. And then the yarns. You mentioned that it is a small shop, and it is, relatively speaking, but I think it's organized very well, and there's some really cool yarn in here. So how do you decide what yarn to stock? Because you obviously have to be very selective.
Yeah, I mean that is, we're quite restricted in what we can get, because we are tiny. It's a tiny shop. We've tried to use the space as efficiently as we can, but we've got two kind of overarching ideals, whatever you want to call it, with what we stock. One, we want to always provide something that's budget friendly, but nice. So we don't stock any acrylics, we don't stock any synthetics, we only stock natural fibres. And our budget brand is at the moment Drops, which is a Scandinavian brand. They do really lovely, good value, good quality budget yarns of a variety of thicknesses and fibres. So that's, I suppose, our main brand. Again, it feeds into us being so close to the university, and we're also quite close to some of the more deprived areas in Glasgow. So it's really important for me that it's not too exclusive, that you can come in and you can buy a sweater quantity of yarn for 20 quid if you want. So that's kind of one of the pillars, and the other one is that we try to showcase British yarn as much as we can. So we have Jameson and Smith, which is the Shetland yarn, just behind me.
Yeah. It's a really good yarn.
It's lovely. It's really lovely to work with and really popular. And then we have a couple of other bits and bobs, and then predominantly we also have West Yorkshire spinners who specialise in British yarn. And they source the fibre within Britain and then do everything sort of on island. They do their own spinning, they do their own packaging, they do everything pretty much from scratch. And they've gotten very, very good recently at doing pure natural fibres. They when they first started, they had quite a lot of blends, but they do a lot of named breeds now, and they do a lot of really nice pure wool as well. So we've got a lovely range of theirs, and then we always try to have a good selection of hand-dyed yarns in stock as well, most of it local. So we work with Mothy and the Squid.
I was going to say, I saw the little wall with her. Oh,
she does the most beautiful stuff.
I'm trying to, I just missed meeting up with her, and she's doing a show in Clockermouth tomorrow.
Yeah.
Friday. So I'm going to see.
She's at Woolfest just now,
Yeah, I'm going to book a hostel and stay here for a couple of days and
cool.
try and
she's
then
great.
go down and check it out.
Yeah.
I've been dying to meet her for so long.
She is great. She is... Boom, boom.
I know. Did it touch?
That's
my only pun, I promise.
Okay, sure. I believe you.
Yeah, right.
Gillian, it's one of those... I find there's a lot of kind of serendipity and nice little coincidences in, I think, knitting in general, but certainly in what happens with me and with my shop. Gillian was one of my first ever regulars. She was on maternity, when I first opened the shop, she was on maternity leave, and she lived just up the road.
Wow.
And this would be one of her kind of sanity walks. She would walk down here, try and get the baby to sleep, and then have a coffee and do some knitting.
Was this her first one?
It must have been, yeah. She's got two, but that must have been her first one, yeah. And we'd kind of hang out and chat about pretty much everything.
Right.
And then they moved away. They moved out to the suburbs, and she started dyeing. And if you've not checked out her work, you totally do, because it's just amazing.
I said, I am dying to meet her because I have to find out how she does it.
Yeah, witchcraft. It's
exactly,
the only way.
Right?
It's the only way.
And what kills me is when she shows the photos on Instagram, and then you see the yarn. It's like you're not looking at yarn; you're looking at the picture.
Yeah.
The picture, like it's
witchcraft.
Yeah.
It's the only explanation.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that I want to meet and I want to interview and I want to bring to everybody.
Yeah.
But I have to meet her.
She's she's great. So it's kind of come round, and she says herself that she's got quite fond memories of sort of sitting here. So she very consciously supports us, and wants to supply us with yarn, and so we always have her stuff in stock. And then we've just recently started a featured dyer slot.
Right.
So at the moment it's Fiberpunk, who's a guy called Marcus who lives on the south side of Glasgow, and he does really cool stuff as well. And what we do is we have a trunk show at the beginning, and everyone can come and meet the dyer and have a look at what they've got and chat to them, and then we'll have their yarn in stock for the month or so following. So at the moment it's Fiberpunk. We've got a couple of others lined up for the rest of the year.
Yes.
And that's always really popular. And people just like to have an excuse to come in and smoosh some yarn, why not?
And you still manage to fit some space for books. I see some spinning wheels and
yes, we try to do as much as we can. So we've got needles and notions, and whatnot upstairs. The spinning wheels, they're for hire. So we're Ashcroft retailers. Not Ashcroft, Ashford. We're Ashford retailers. So the idea is that we've got a tradi and a kiwi in stock, and people can hire them before they buy, and then we can sell them the product as well. We can get various bits and bobs as well. We've got a drum carder as well that you can hire, or just play with. So yeah, and we've got a spinning group that meets once a month. First Sunday of every month, we've got a spinning group that come in, which is always good fun. Trying to get lots of spinning wheels into this space can be challenging, but we make it, we manage it. And then we, as I said, we've got some books, we've got patterns, we've got...
And you can connect to Ravelry and get patterns.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we're a Ravelry retailer as well. And then we've got we stock Knit Pro, Clover, various bits and bobs. So one-stop shop for all things knitting and cake related.
Nice. Okay, so obviously being in Glasgow and being a small shop like this, you need an online presence, and you have one.
We are
done well,
all over the place.
Okay.
You name it, we've got it.
You have your website. What's
that? The website is www.theyarncake.co.uk.
Okay. And then you're on Instagram?
We're on Instagram, The Yarn Cake.
Cool.
And the same goes for Facebook and Twitter as well. We're The Yarn Cake on those too.
Wow, cool. And how do you find the online, like dealing with online and like, what do I call that? Brick and mortar?
We don't actually have an online shop, so that makes life a lot easier. Just because we don't have the logistics for it, we don't have the storage space for it. So we don't need to worry about sort of dealing with that side of things. What we can do is for customers can call or message us if they're short of ball or something, or if they've got something specific in mind. We've got a very lovely lady based in Italy who every once in a while messages me and go, pick me something pretty hand-dyed and send it to me. It'll be like a present for myself. Because she knows that she likes what we stock, so she knows she's not going to go wrong with it. So we do mail order for people who know what they're after.
Right.
But we don't have an online shop as such.
Gotcha. Okay. And then social media, keeping on top of that. Are you the one doing it?
I'm pretty much it for, you name it, I'm it.
Isn't that like 2 jobs?
It's a million jobs. Yeah. Don't forget I've got a toddler at home as well, so...
Yeah, I met him. Wow.
You did meet him, yeah. I mean, this is why smartphones are a thing, because you can just sit at home on the sofa and catch up on things. That said, our social media tends to not take a lot of moderating. We don't tend to have arguments on our social media, unlike other, so I suppose more busier places. Most of the time, I put up a picture of cake and then I get half a dozen replies of people going, that looks amazing, I'll be round in a minute. So I can cope with that, that's fine. Nice. It's not a problem.
Nice. What's the community like around here, around Glasgow?
The knitting community?
Yeah.
It's great. It's really, really active. There's quite a few knitting groups dotted around the place. And we've got sort of more yarn shops now as well, or within the general vicinity. So there's a nice little yarn shop on the south side now. There's one in Kirkintilloch that does a lot of hand-dyed stuff as well. And generally we've got, again, going back to we're near the university, we've got a really interesting mix of people, because what we find a lot is come September, our customer base changes, because you've got people who are coming to uni either as undergrads or who've come from elsewhere as postgrads or PhD students or whatever else, and quite a lot of them have worked out that the way to make friends is to join some kind of a social group, and if they're knitters, then the knitting group's the obvious thing to do. So we're actually quite multinational. We've got people from all over that come to our knitting group, and people all ages and all kinds of backgrounds. I always think knitting's one of life's great levelers.
It is, isn't it?
It really is.
I was talking to somebody the other day with regards to knitting and everything and saying that it's kind of like going to church.
Right.
If you walk into any church you can think of, there's no age limit and there's no demographic. There's no nationality. Like it's everybody.
Yeah.
It literally is everybody. Like when somebody says, "Well, who do you cater to?" You can say,
Everyone.
Everybody.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Men, women, everybody.
Yeah.
I love it for that. It's just.
Absolutely, and I love kind of watching a knitting group because you can kind of sit there and you're like, so this person's a housewife from one of the poorer areas in Glasgow, say, and this person's a pilot who flies private jets, and this person's an academic, and this person works, I don't know, in a call centre or as a teacher or whatever else, and you've got the whole breadth of it, and the beauty of it is that people who wouldn't normally necessarily meet in a social context do, and because they've got something in common, there's no barrier there, because all you do is you turn around to the person next to you and you go, so what are you working on? What are you knitting? And boom, you've got a conversation. You don't need to worry about it. And the other thing that I really love about it is it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert, if you're a people person or not, because if you're having a rough day and you really don't actually feel like speaking to anybody, but you need to get out the house, you can go to a knitting group and nobody's going to go, oh, such and such didn't say a word this evening. How rude was that? What they're going to say is, oh, such and such was really quietly knitting away today. I wonder what they're working on. And I think to some extent also people are a lot more aware of mental health issues and whatnot in the context of knitting groups. So I think there isn't a stigma involved. Like I've got a lot of customers with anxiety or depression or other mental health issues, and quite a lot of them I've had conversations with and said, you can just come and sit in a corner and be quiet if you need to get out of the house. Because nobody cares. No one's going to judge you for that. Nobody cares. And then if you fancy chatting, you can do that as well. Sometimes we sit here at Knit Night and I think this is a therapy session or a knitting group because we talk through stuff because it's a safe environment for people. And I think that's really important. I think it's a really positive thing about the community in general, that it provides the spaces for people to do that.
Excellent. Just remind me again when you're knitting members, Thursday nights?
Thursday nights, 6 till 9.
6 to 9,
yep.
Right here at the Yarn Cake.
Right here at the Yarn Cake. If it gets busy, you might get a bit cozy.
That's okay. Hey, Mr. Hugs.
Well, yeah, you're in the right place. You're in the right place. We've had 24 people in here.
Wow.
But people were actively camping out on the steps. Like we couldn't see everyone.
That's cool.
But that was really good fun as well.
The other thing, obviously, here, other than knitting, is cake.
Yes.
And not yarn cakes. Cake.
Actual edible cake.
Now,
yes.
What I found really cool or curious or whatever is over here, and by over here I mean the UK and Europe. When you guys say cake, you're talking pastries and desserts and things like that, right? Yeah, because when we say
what
cake,
do you mean?
Well, when we say cake, it's cake, like a chocolate cake. It's
right.
not,
okay. Yeah. Okay.
Pastries and desserts have their own.
Have their own thing. Okay.
Like pies and whatever.
Yeah.
Like cake can literally be a croissant here, right? Not so much. But
you would. I mean, if you were talking specifically about it, you would probably still say pastry, but also you're not. If somebody presents you with a cake. Buffet, for example, you wouldn't kind of go, what's that croissant doing there?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you have cake here that
cake.
you make here. What do you have? What's arranged? How often do you change it?
We have a repertoire. Probably about 25 different things, 25 different things that we go through. We always try to have at least 3 different cakes on offer. And we always try to have at least one gluten-free cake on offer because we've got quite a few customers that can't have gluten.
And I noticed that Sunday at the festival that you had a vegan
cake. We don't have vegan cakes as standard, but we're also absolutely in favour of people phoning us saying we're coming around on Friday, we're bringing 3 vegans, go. Like we will try to cater to everyone. If we know they're coming, we try to cater to everyone.
That's awesome.
We have previously catered to both a gluten-free and a vegan, where there was also somebody with a nut allergy present. That was a challenge, but we did it.
Wow.
So we try to cater to everyone if we know they're coming, and we always have something gluten-free in stock, and then we always try to have something chocolatey in stock because people like chocolate. And we do a lot of fruit-based cakes as well. And yeah, we cycle them round. So quite a lot of them are seasonal. So at the moment I've got a strawberry tart. And I only... It's really nice. Even if I do say so myself. But I only do that when there's British strawberries in the shops, because I think seasonality is really important.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I do a really nice rhubarb meringue as well.
Rhubarb meringue?
Meringue, yeah.
Shut the front door. How do you do rhubarb meringue?
Well, you're going to have to hang about and find out.
When are you doing that?
I don't know, actually. I've got rhubarb in the cupboard.
Okay.
But...
Can I camp out in the back?
Sure, yeah. Put you up a hammock. That's fine. There's a bathroom here. It's great.
You heard that, right?
The rhubarb meringue is the cake I've baked the longest. I learned to make it. We moved to a little small holding in Ireland when I was 12, and the garden had established rhubarb plants, and my mother doesn't bake. So we had this crazy harvest of rhubarb, and my mum went, bake a cake, go.
Wow.
And I found this recipe for a rhubarb meringue, and I've been making the same cake for quite some time.
Okay, I'll stay here till Friday.
Okay.
But you have to make it before
Deal.
then.
We can do that.
You heard that, right, Jen? You heard?
This is an easy ask. That we can totally do that.
Excellent. And so then, and with the drinks, you have all the drinks as well, like coffee, tea, cold and hot.
Yeah, and again, we source quite deliberately. So our coffee is from a company called Dear Green.
It's fabulous, by the way. People, look, empty glass.
Empty glass. It's gone.
Interview's not even over, and the glass is empty.
I'll make
Really,
you another
really
minute.
good.
It's a local roastery. They're very clear on using sustainable methods, and they pick the beans from ethically run plantations. They pay the living wage. They're really ethical in how they run the business, and they make really good coffee. And they offer a great service. They're absolutely brilliant to deal with. I would take them 20 times over. They're great people to deal with. The teas, we do loose leaf teas, and we've got a variety. And again, they come from a local company called Pico Tea, who are based in Edinburgh, and they import all their own stuff, again, from known suppliers. And they do some really interesting things. So we've got green teas, white teas, Earl Grey, Assam, you name it, we've got it. And they do their own blend. They've got a Scottish summer fruit blend, for example, which is a green tea with brambles and various things through it. That's really nice.
It's just the brambles and me. Yes,
it's really, really lovely. And then we've got a variety of soft drinks. We don't do fizzy juice, but we do fizzy juice, but nice, posh fizzy juice. So we have nice fruit juices and Fentimans fizzy juice and things like that. And we also, harking back to the German side of things, we do iced lattes, but then we also do iced chocolade and iced coffee, which is something that the Germans get very excited about, which is basically an iced coffee and an iced chocolate, but involves quite a lot of squishy cream and sugar and ice cream, and is divine. And I can't have any at the moment because I'm not meant to be taking anything with fat in it, so it's very sad.
Yes.
God let her suck.
Okay, so now this is my favorite thing to do with everybody that I get a chance to chat with. Okay. We're going to play a game.
Sure we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very simple game.
Okay.
But you'd be surprised how people complicate it.
Oh God.
It's called Either Or.
Right.
Now, it's either or.
Yes.
Not maybe, not yes, not whatever. You don't get to throw in an option C or say both. Yeah. Okay? Are we clear on that part?
Well, yeah, I'll try my best.
Do you think you can play along?
I'll give it my best shot, Steve.
Okay, we'll start easy and then
Okay.
progress. And with you, I feel I can get into some really cool
Okay.
ones because, you know, I kind of know you a little bit.
I am
Okay.
deeply concerned at this point, but let's go.
All right, well, so we'll start easy. Knit or crochet?
No.
Knit. Okay. DK or Aaron?
Aaron.
Ah, cool. Texture or color? Ooh, look at
Color.
that. Color. Wow. Okay. Black or white?
White.
Let's get into. Oh, right. You do drinks. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Tea. Gin or wine?
Wine.
Oh, that's surprising. I just, you know, it's a surprise.
I'm German,
Okay.
of course it's wine.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Wine or beer? Ooh, there we go.
I'm German!
Yeah, so.
Ooh. I don't actually drink much, so it's mostly a moot point. Wine.
Still wine.
Still wine.
Okay.
Don't tell my dad.
Alright. Last thing with that then, red or white?
White.
White. Okay. Let's see. I'm not sure about this, but Marvel or DC?
I'm not allowed neither.
You're not allowed neither.
Television or cinema?
No, Marvel or DC.
Damn it.
I guess at this
Marvel.
point you can really only say Marvel.
Yeah, Marvel.
Marvel. Huh. Okay, and then if you do Marvel, let's go with Iron Man or Captain America.
Oh, Captain America.
Oh crap! This is good.
Obviously.
Yeah, no ego.
All right.
Ego's unsexy.
Okay,
Seriously.
totally last one then, and totally off the cuff. Boxers or briefs?
Boxers.
There we go.
That was a perfect
Okay.
time for you to come in. Please do come in. Rescue me.
Okay, so everybody knows that I love to do, well, I love to course the places that I go to do giveaways because, you know, it's kind of nice and everybody feels good about getting things. So we have a giveaway specific to the yarn cake.
Yes.
And let's show everybody what they're going to get first.
Yeah.
So they'll get the bag.
So yes,
bag.
so we've got a yarn cake project bag.
And this is specially commissioned and made just for you guys.
Yeah, so we're very lucky. We've got quite a lot of artists in our kind of
Yeah.
family, shall we say?
Yeah.
The yarn cake family. We have artists, and this is done by an artist called Georgia Green, who just graduated from the Glasgow School of Art.
Nice.
And she does these really beautiful things, and she made this for us. She designed this for us.
Excellent.
So you'll get
So the
one of these bags,
Bag. Nice.
and then also a yarn cake badge to remind you of us.
Yay.
And then one of my absolute favourite sock yarns, the West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply. And this is one of their British Birds range, and it's the Kingfisher. So it's got the
Yay.
colours of a kingfisher, and it can remind you of us.
Excellent. Okay, so there will be a picture, and this is what the picture is going to look like. And what you'll need to do is follow you on Instagram and tag 3 friends on the post with this picture. Now, they don't have to be knitters or crocheters, but you know,
But it helps if they are.
Yeah, it helps if they are. And then your name goes into a draw, and we will pick somebody, and this will get sent out to them.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. It's great.
Anytime. Not anytime. Occasionally.
Inside the yarn cave, and there is a gentleman here. His name is John, and he is knitting his first jumper. Is that right?
Yeah, first jumper.
And how long have you been knitting, John?
I actually only started at the end of January, so it's
Wow.
been quite quick, yeah.
So like 6 months, and you're knitting a
More or
jumper.
less, yeah.
Excellent. And what made you want to even knit?
At the end of last year, I thought about doing something more with my hands, and I thought about embroidery for a
Right.
while, and I got the embroidery hoops and the little skeins of thread and all the needles, and I started to do it, and I enjoyed it, but I felt like it was really quite fiddly, and the results were quite small,
Right.
contained little things.
Right.
And so I tried throughout January to kind of keep that going, and I enjoyed it, but the next kind of step to that was using bigger needles and knitting. And so I started knitting.
Yeah. And you like knitting?
Yeah, mostly because it gave me what I wasn't getting from embroidery, which was continual progress. I was able to knit a scarf, and I've got the knit stitch. I was able to do a hat, and I could decrease, and I could purl and do ribbing. I was able to do a shawl, and I could bind off mid-row, and kind of that's the way I've been doing it. I've been teaching myself like at least one new skill every single thing I did.
That's excellent. So you've done all those things already: scarf, a shawl, hat,
Yeah,
everything.
and so I'm doing a jumper and socks at the same time.
At the same time, wow, that's incredible. And what are you going to do after that? Because after that, you'll know how to make anything.
I think, well, I picked this pattern for this jumper because it was quite simple. I think I might then try a jumper with something
Cables?
else going on at the same time, a cable or other colours, some sort of design work. I've seen patterns with grid formation things.
Yeah.
They
Vintage.
terrify me, so I think at some point I'm going to want to do that. Or brioche. I think brioche would be...
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Well, welcome to the community. There's a lot to learn. You can actually be knitting different things for years and not that. Are you on Ravelry or Instagram or anything like that?
Ravelry on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's iWritePro, so IWRIGHTPRO.
Okay, on both, on Instagram and Ravelry. We're going to have a look for you, John, and it'll be great to see your progress as time goes by.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Okay.
Winter rose.
What is your knitting? What are you working on?
The Montana Mountain Cowl. It's just in Montana with Andrea Mowry.
Look at you, so you get around, huh?
All the way across the Atlantic.
And what yarn is that?
This is Spin Cycle and Farmer's Daughter Sokapi.
Oh man, that strawberry cake was so good. My mouth is actually watering now just from revisiting that in my memory. And so I will definitely be back, and I'll probably get over there for the 10th anniversary next year. Oh gosh. So while I was over in the UK, I also ran into a good friend of mine, Felix, also known as Felicity Ford. Actually, it's Felicity Ford, also known as Felix. Everybody just calls her Felix. I can't even tell you what to say. I mean, there is just, I could go on and on and on and on and on talking about Felix. It's so fascinating. As a matter of fact, I kind of did. I shot so much footage of Felix that I am splitting her up into 2 episodes of the show. So this is basically part 1, and part 2 will be in the next episode in the next 2 weeks. And she was doing this other special project that I was filmed as well. So that'd be another thing altogether. But what is Felix? Who is Felix? What is Felix all about? There's just no way to describe it. But if you had told me that somebody could tell me that asphalt, or tarmac as she calls it, has different colors and it's actually interesting and you can knit it, I would have just laughed at you. And then if you had told me that you could actually knit sounds, and sounds a thing, I'd have thought, okay, well, you're a little out there. But believe it or not, Felix does exactly that. Now, don't you dare hit that pause button, because honestly, this is some of the most fascinating knitting inspiration I've ever seen and ever Like I'm just thrilled to have actually been there and shared this with Felix, and I think you're going to very, very much enjoy it, and quite a few of you are going to appreciate this. And just look at everything, your sources of inspiration entirely differently. Come with me. We're gonna go meet Felix, and you're gonna see what I'm talking about. And remember, there's a second part coming up next episode as well. Can we come in? Yes. Okay, so this is Felix's little studio, and look, there she is. Hey, how are you?
I'm thrilled to welcome you into the Knit Sonic headquarters.
Awesome. This is where all the magic happens, huh?
It
is. Great. Felix. It's okay if I call you Felix, right?
Yeah. Please do.
That's what everybody calls you? Okay, great. As I was trying to tell everybody in the introduction, you're more than a little box, right? And I can't possibly find a box to fit you in. What do you do?
So what do I do? I always describe myself as an artist who works with knitting and sounds, because I think that's the common thread through everything I do, is that I'm an artist and I'm interested in representing the world and how we think about the world that's around us every day. So I do, under that Knit Sonic umbrella, I teach workshops about translating everyday life into stranded colourwork. I've published 3 books that are about that exact idea, and I do sound projects, more for like museums, and I did a project for Shetland Wool Week where I used sound to document the working wool industry of Shetland. I did a project for Tate Modern where I documented the sounds of how silk and viscose in an exhibit there were produced. And the common theme between these things is obviously textiles and an interest in textiles, but also creative processes that help us to more deeply connect with everyday things. Does that kind of make sense? I mean, it's like a...
Yeah. Let's talk about the sound thing just for a second, because, you know, people don't think of sound and knitting as related and everything else. But just your background in the sound, you actually have a doctorate with sound as the thing. Can you tell us about that briefly?
Yeah, so I did my doctorate in the domestic soundscape and beyond, presenting everyday sounds to audiences, and it was a practice-based PhD that was just all exploring this idea of we're surrounded by everyday sounds all the time. What can we do with that material? And I did a lot of just listening to where I live and listening to Reading and listening to my house, and I really dislike this. It's almost like a political dislike of this idea that everyday, ordinary, banal reality is kind of rubbish and throwaway, and like special magic art reality is like this reserved thing that we only have like on the weekend. So yeah, my doctorate was just looking at how do we bring that special way of looking, that way of seeing, that way of appreciating, how do we bring that to bear on the everyday stuff that surrounds us, and how do you frame an everyday sound in a way where someone just doesn't go, well, that's rubbish, why would I listen to that?
Oh, okay. Now, again, if we can get a description, and you know, you have to forgive my ignorance and whatever, but how do you then take sound and translate that to knitting? Like, how did you make the jump from getting your doctorate in sound and then becoming a knitwear designer and author and teacher and everything else?
Well, so I suppose it was very circumstantial, where I had moved to Oxford to do an MA first before I did my PhD, and my MA was in sonic art and composition. I was 25, I didn't know anybody, I'd never lived in Oxford before, and I was thinking, how am I going to make friends and how am I going to connect with people? And I saw a sign advertising for a knitting group. So I went to the knitting group, the Oxford Blue Stockings, who I believe still meet on Wednesdays in Oxford, and still going strong, I think. And so I started going there, and I suppose I was by day learning about like John Cage and Alison Knowles and Fluxus and kind of Pauline Oliveros, all these different kind of practitioners, and I was learning the sort of how do I actually record sounds, the kind of more technical side of that. And then by night I was like learning how to make a sock, or how to understand gauge. And
So you weren't a knitter at this point, you were just learning to knit.
yeah, so I'd learned to knit as a child, and I'd sort of done, like, I could do a garter strip. Kind of that was the level. And so I went to this knitting group, and yeah, that was the start of, and I suppose I just kept, these things were just in front of me all the time, the knitting and the sound thing. And something I found very interesting was that people would say to me, you know, they would see me with my little handheld recorder and they would say, oh, that's very technical. And then they'd see me knitting a sock and say, oh, that's very crafty. But if you've ever knit a sock,
That's very technical.
that's much more technical than pressing record on a... And so I started to think about that. And there's always been a certain feminist bent to my kind of, to my arts practice. And I started thinking it would be interesting to do more stuff that collapses these borders between technical and crafty. And so I think the first Knit Sonic project was a knitted speaker sound system, and that was kind of, so I bought all these little Mylar cone speakers. I had 16 in the left channel and 16 in the right channel, so 32 in total, and I knitted each one, and kind of it was like a mashup of like knit and crochet, and they each had a cozy, and then I covered all the wires with I-cord, and I just made this crazy big kind of suspended knitted sound system. And I thought at the time I was doing a lot of recordings of very domestic things. I was recording like pouring rice into a bowl, or like a saucepan, or the sounds of washing up, or the sound of rain on the roof, and all these very everyday kind of sonic textures. And I thought, rather than stick them on a big kind of black chrome Genelec surround sound system, I thought, why not, would it not be more apposite to play them through something that speaks to that domestic context? So that was kind of the first knit and sound project that I did. But then it became more and more, my sound practice became much more about how listening is part of our sense of place. And then I also started to look at the kind of really in-placed textiles. So like in Estonia, they have these very particular knitting traditions, weaving traditions, embroidery traditions. And then in Shetland as well, they have like, you know, you have like Fair Isle, and you have Unst lace, and you have all these kind of very in-placed textiles. And I think that sounds have that very particular relationship to place as well. So it kind of morphed. It started out as a very literal, I will take sounds, I will record them, I will play them through speakers, I will knit a cover for the speakers, into something that was much more about, ooh, with textiles I can speak to a sense of place, with sound I can speak to a sense of place. And it's kind of, I think my practice has gone more towards that in recent years.
So you've taught workshops in that where you've correlated the two together?
Yes, so I was really lucky at the beginning of last year. I did a project at the Museum of English Rural Life. We were really looking at, I was looking at how to increase engagement with the whole project was about using artistic processes to increase engagement with the collection. And so I obviously approached that from a knitting and sound perspective. And so one of the things that they have at the Museum of English Rural Life is this amazing collection of farmers' smocks, which were these really traditional kind of farming garments. And they would have identified you as a farmer, and they're really, it's like the fabric is bunched up and sewn in a really amazing way. And so what we did in the workshop, thinking about those smocks, is we did, you can't really, it doesn't show up very well on this wool, but we did like smocking stitch, a kind of textured knit stitch that looks like smocking. And we used wool, this is Herdwick wool. It is, it's fairly rustic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and this is from Pam Hall's flock up in the Lake District. And we knitted
You can actually see that texture.
just about. And we listened to all this audio that I'd recorded on her farm of her talking about talking about her animals, talking about the land, talking about the whole business of being a farmer in the Lake District and having a flock of herdwicks, and I just wanted to bring together the kind of the identity of the farmer that's in these smocked garments together with the activity of knitting, and also to like have something in our hands and to know we can hear where that's come from. And what I really love is, if you look, these are from 2 separate clips, and you can see that they came out a different, like
Gauge
this,
and everything.
the gauge is different, but also the texture and just the colour. And it's because of these organic, impossible to control variations. So that was one of the workshops. I did another one that was in the Museum of English Rural Life. They have a collection of knitwear that was donated from Shetland in, I guess, like the 1930s for a British Council exhibition. And there's a pair of gloves in that, in amongst those donations. And they have a very similar, it's almost exactly these 2 colours, and they have this very interesting detail where it looks as though the knitter has used a crochet hook to around the fingers on each of the fingers. It's like in the gap between 2 of the stitches she's picked up this incredible, it's like a little edge stitch, and it's not stranded because you can't see it on the back of the work. Anyway, so it was this particular detail, and I thought, well, in a 3-hour workshop we won't have time to make a whole pair of gloves, but we can make a pin cushion that uses that same technique. And so we had this whole conversation about stranded colour work and how did she do the technique and how did this get into this exhibition. And meanwhile I played all these recordings that I made around Shetland, again making a connection between what's in the museum, what's in our hands, and a sense of place of where those things come from through the sounds. I did they have an amazing sheep bell collection, and I've got a video on my YouTube channel that is just a mix of these different sheep bells being sounded, because most of the time they sit in a cabinet and you can't go anywhere near them. And I made a...
What's your YouTube channel?
It's I think if you just go Knitsonic YouTube channel, it should come up. And yeah, so I made a pattern for a little sheep bell, and it has a little tiny bell in it.
Right.
But what we did as well was we made these. We listened to all these recordings of sheep bells, because sheep bells were a big part of the British farming landscape. They're not really anymore. But they were for a long time, and now, I mean, in places around Switzerland and France and Greece and around the Mediterranean and throughout kind of rural mainland Europe, you'll get sheep bells, but not so much in the UK. But I put together a little kit for making stitch markers, and then as we were knitting the sheep bells, we used the markers to mark the places where the increases and decreases are made. And so as we were knitting, we were all making our own little, like, our flock of stitches was sounding. So you can hear now recorded sound of sheep bells, but not from the UK, because the practice of putting bells on sheep had died out by the time we had sound recording technology. But you have loads of accounts in old books about shepherding that are to do with sheep bells. And this is amazing. This is a book called A Shepherd's Life by W.H. Hudson. And in it, he basically is saying, I won't read it all because it goes on, but he observes that starlings, which are an amazing mimic as a bird, they mimic the sounds that are around them. He noticed that starlings were producing a sound that sounded like sheep bells. And he was talking about how basically the starlings have recorded that sound in the British countryside. So if you hear starlings doing like a sheep bell sound, you can presume that their ancestors heard sheep bells sounding, learnt to mimic the sound. So it's like a field recording made by birds in
nature's way of preserving its history. Wow.
And now now I listen to starlings. Conversely, once you know that, if you hear a starling, it's given me this realization that you're also hearing what the starling heard because of its amazing mimicry. So I just thought that was beautiful.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, so those are some of the kind of sound and knitting and sound workshops that I've done. And then, oh yeah, I did one. It's a tiny little silk bracelet, and this is silk that I processed myself from silk that was grown in the UK, in the UK's only silk farm that I've been able to find out about, because they have a book. They have like quite a few kind of relics in the Museum of English Rural Life that relate to this this silk farm that this woman set up in. It was in a Castle Lullingston silk farm. She was kind of like this aristocrat lady. I can't remember her name now. Lady Elizabeth. No. Lady Zoe Hart Dyke. And her silk farm that she set up. So spins the silkworm. This is the whole story of like this silk farm that was set up in the UK, and I found it amazing. I tried to grow some silk and I was really struck by what a precious, expensive, difficult textile it is to work with. So I got some, they still have like lying around in corners of the internet, there's still some kind of hanks of silk that was grown in Lullingston Silk Farm. So I processed it, then hand spun it, and we all made these tiny little bracelets while listening to my recordings of silkworms and kind of sections of Zoe Lady Hart Dyke's book. So yeah, bringing knitting and sound together.
So at some point in time, you made a transition from sound to other inspiration for your knitting, for your color work? Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Can you fill us in on that, like how that happened and when it happened?
Sure. So I had been doing all these projects that were about, I'd done a lot of knitting with very place-specific wool, like the Herdwick that we were just talking about, and Shetland wool from Shetland and Estonian wool from Estonia. And I'd been doing various sound projects and was increasingly doing a lot of sound projects that were about amplifying and recording the labour that goes into the production of yarn. And I was invited to be the patron for Shetland Wool Week in 2013 after my friend Kate stepped down from that role, and they said, what do you want to do? And I was like, what can I do? And the two ideas I had really firmly in my mind is, first of all, that I wanted to make like a sound map that celebrated and recorded and amplified some of the voices and labour and textures behind Shetland wool. And then secondly, to kind of knit something that would enable knitters to kind of materially connect with those sounds. So this is it's a pillow speaker, and it's covered in, sadly now discontinued, Aran yarn from Jameson and Smith. And the two colours I chose are like green for like the land and blue for the sea, because the two traditional income sources in Shetland are wool from the croft and fish from the sea. And this pattern is called the Knit Sonic Knitted Speakers concept, and it has the instructions for this very simple kind of speaker, but then it also talks about the kind of history of the history of wool in Shetland a little bit, and why listening to wool teaches us things that we wouldn't otherwise understand about knitting. And then it has on this back page, it has this big list of sounds, like Ingrid cutting and carrying peat on Laurie's peat bank, terns and oyster catchers at Toft around the ferry terminal. And these are all sounds I've recorded around Shetland, and you can download them all for free off the Ep8 sound map. So yeah, that was one of my ideas, was I want to make a sound map. I want to talk about what we can understand about Shetland wool through listening to Shetland wool. And then I also had this, for ages I'd had this idea of, I want to teach a class in celebrating everyday life in stranded colourwork, which in a way is a sort of reverse idea. It's like using sound to record the textures of where wool is from, and then using knitting and wool to record the kind of more visual textures of everyday life. So yeah, I offered to teach this class in 6 months' time, which is a really effective way to make sure that you have to know something inside out. If you said, I'm going to teach this in 6 months' time, then you better know it in 6 months' time. And I taught this class quotidian colourwork, which is colourwork, stranded colourwork based on everyday inspirations. And I thought afterwards, wow, there is a lot that I didn't get to say in this class, and there's a lot that I've thought about which I didn't get to share. And I mentioned to a couple of people who'd been on the class, what do you think? Do you think I should like maybe write a book about this? Do you think anyone would be interested in this? And I got a very positive response. And because I'm an artist and I've been skint for most of my adult life, I came home and I said to Mark, people think I should make this book. And he was like, I'm not letting you sink your life savings into a book that nobody wants. You need to test the market and see, does anybody want this book? And so I ran a Kickstarter which did two things. It first of all let me test the idea, is anyone else interested in a book that is about taking everyday inspirations and turning them into stranded colourwork? And secondly, just on a much more practical level, it allowed me to raise the funds to publish that book, which here's one I published earlier. So yeah, this is the Knit Sonic Stranded Colourwork source book, and it's, I think some of the things, like a lot of knitters probably are familiar with Alice Starmore's book of Fair Isle Knitting, and there's an amazing section in there that just has like a photo of the inspiration source, amazing perfect swatch of the thing. And I'll be honest, like I looked at it and I went, I'm an artist, I've been to art school, I get it, I know what to do. And I just started churning out all this colour work that was, there was no contrast, you couldn't see the pattern wasn't standing out, there was jumps, everything looked stripy, it was a big mush. I'd taken all the right colours and then I'd knitted them and it just looked like mud. And I was like, there is a space of process between the photo and the swatch, and I want to know what that space is, and that is what is in this book, is that process. And so yeah, unlike Alice Starmore's book of Fair Isle Knitting, which has the perfect finished swatch, this shows loads of stuff that didn't work, stuff that didn't that didn't work out. So my big claim to fame is that I published a book that's got loads of mistake knitting in it. But you know, mistakes are phenomenally useful, and I think that sometimes in knitting, where there is definitely like a right way and a wrong way to do things, like a lot of techniques in knitting, there is like a right way to do an SSK, or a right way to do a yarn over, or a right way to knit purlwise, but like creativity, if you're that black and white about it, you never get off first base, because you put one idea down and go, that's right or that's wrong, and then you
never
need
get to first base.
No, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, this really, it kind of, the book really looks at like the whole process of looking at what inspires us and why are we inspired. So some things that have inspired me: my little digital sound recorder that I used for all my sound recording work for years, my first pair of socks that I knit with variegated yarns. If you've got a skein of variegated yarn that you love the way the colours sit together, that is a really helpful guide to, well, I could pick out those colours as individual balls of yarn and they might work together in colour work. So everything can inspire. So those are the various, like I look at how do you pull a palette out of a thing, an everyday thing that inspires you, and then I look at how do you pull out like a motif or a pattern, and then I look at troubleshooting it so that it fits into the medium itself of stranded colourwork, so you don't end up with massive long strands or big gaps or 75 colours per round, which nobody wants to knit. Sorry, Kaif.
Don't be sorry, I'm pretty sure he didn't knit his either. Yeah, other people knit them for him.
And then I put my swatches. I mean, I put a lot of space in this book for swatches because I think swatches are such an amazing learning space. And I went through and annotated them with like, this didn't work, this does work, I'm pleased with this, I'm not pleased with that. And yeah, so this book is predominantly about creative process, and it really celebrates swatching, looking, playing, picking a palette. And I didn't want to put the pressure on the knitter at the very first outset of like, this is going to be a garment that you're going to wear, because then that's always weighing on you, like, oh, this is going to have to become a sweater, and how am I going to do this, and you're kind of second guessing yourself. And I was like, no, what you need is like a library of brilliant stranded colour work that speaks to your sense of place of where you are in the world, which you can then draw from to embellish your own garments. I thought it's much easier to separate those two ideas.
So you brought out this source book about stranded color work through everyday objects and that. What everyday objects were you inspired by, or did you see that made you come up with these palettes and that?
So one of the most obvious things was the bricks of Reading, where I live, because it's just like charts that you can just read off the streets, and they're just kind of everywhere. And I'd wanted to do something with the bricks of Reading for a long time. It was one of the first things I swatched, was the bricks of my town.
Mm-hmm. Bricks seem, I mean, they're definitely all over and everything else, but I mean, like the terracotta, like what is it about bricks that would stand out to you?
It's the fact that it's in Reading. There's a specific clay that fires to this particular shade of red called Reading Red, and then they've got these bricks that they bring in from this is in the Victorian kind of the sort of massive expansion of Reading happened in like the 1800s, and bricks were a relatively cheap kind of quick way to build these big long terraced streets. And yeah, the most readily available local material was this Reading brick, and there was kilning techniques to create a darker brick, and there was also, Reading's quite well connected through the canals and the rail network to Wales, and in Wales you get this very this amazing kind of fire resistant, very close packed creamy coloured clay that is found in seams next to coal. And so the Victorians imported all these kind of pale cream bricks and used them to, so then you've got a palette of kind of emplaced materials that the bricklayers just kind of put their imagination to work and did diamonds and zigzags and patterns around windows. And that just reminds me of the way that in Shetland, for example, with fair knitting, you've got like merchants coming in with things like indigo and madder, and then you've got like a palette of different coloured Shetland sheep, so they've always kept the different colours within the breed. So you've got like a whole palette of natural kind of creams and browns, and then lots of different plant materials will dye yellow, and then you've got madder and indigo from from merchants travelling through. So that's your palette that comes from your place, with which you make sweaters that have these beautiful patterns on them to keep you warm. And in Reading, the brickwork, that's your palette that comes from this place to build your houses to keep you warm. And I just think it's perfect.
And was all your inspiration from bricks?
No.
Or were there other things?
There were many other things. So my Edirol, my little digital recorder, which is just a little consumer electronics recorder that I've recorded sounds with since 2007. I think I first got the Edirol. And I was kind of interested in pushing this idea that you could be inspired by your relationship with an object, that it's not necessarily about going, oh, that's really pretty and I love the colours, but it's more like, this object really means something to me, so if I look at it, what can I pull out of it? An A-road, my favourite A-road, the A4074, which connects Oxford, where I did my studies, with Reading, where I live now. yeah, I made a radio show about that in 2010, and then I made a swatch about it in 2014 for the book. So there are 12 inspiration sources in total in the book, and they're grouped under things, places and plants, because those are my 3 favourite contexts.
So you wrote your first book with the inspiration, the source book.
The source book.
And I guess that was successful enough that you decided you'd do more.
Yeah, so it's kind of, when you put something out into the world that's a creative prompt, it's amazing to see what kind of comes back. And there was a couple of things, like my thinking was I want to get people doing the swatches, exploring the system, developing confidence, and then create a selection of projects that will allow them to then apply those kind of ideas to a finished thing. So the second book is much more about projects, but it also kind of includes the community that has grown around the ideas in the first book. So the Knit Sonic Stranded Colourwork playbook is really, it's kind of, I think there's 5 main projects in there, and I call them projects rather than patterns, because each one is like a whole more expanded thing than just you make a thing and then you've got a thing. It's like so the first chapter is called Knitted Correspondence, and that's really because these 2 amazing women, Muriel, who lives in France, and Yumi, who lives in Japan, got my first book and started doing these beautiful little knitted postcards that are now, they've got a Ravelry group and they're trying to kind of build more of a following around this idea, and they're tiny little swatches that are just like one idea, and you post it on Instagram or you post it through the post every month. And so they have all these kind of, there's a whole chapter about their creative process and recording daily life as a postcard and then sharing it, and that sense of cultural exchange. And we each made a postcard that was based on the view from our window. So this is mine, and it's based on the view out of that window right behind where Steve is sitting right now of the mulberry tree. And then this is the view from Muriel's kitchen window, and this is the view from Yumi's balcony in Tokyo. So we sort of looked at that idea of like,
incredible.
Anyone could look out of their window and make a knitted postcard based on what they saw. So the first chapter is all about that. The second chapter, I mentioned I made a road swatch. This is my A road swatch in the first book, and my big realization while working on this swatch is that tarmac has many different colors in it, and this led to, like, I talked about the many different colors in tarmac at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and Coranda and Gemma, who were kind of there in the audience, came up to me the next day and said, "We just loved what you said about tarmac." Oh yeah, I gave away a prize of framed photos, macro photos of tarmac. And
Can I stop you for 1 second?
yeah.
For those people that don't realize it, tarmac is asphalt. That's basically what we're talking about.
Yes.
In North America, we'd say asphalt. Tarmac would be what's on a runway at an airport.
Okay.
But it's the same thing. That's what you're
Asphalt,
basically
yeah.
talking about. Okay.
Asphalt?
Sorry, asphalt.
Asphalt.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so that's it, basically, yeah, asphalt. And they just really, they were like, "We've had this idea, we really loved your talk, and we love what you said about tarmac, asphalt, and we're going to start a thing on Tuesday, take a photo of tarmac, upload it to Instagram, call it #TarmacTuesday. So the second chapter in this book is actually my friend Liz made this bunting pattern when myself and Mark got married. She secretly wrote to everybody, all my friends, and said, you know, make a flag. And she incorporated increases to basically turn this kind of swatch into a triangle that is a bunting flag. And I said, this pattern's amazing. We must share this pattern with the world. What is a creative, celebratory, shared context that everyone could join in on? And we were like, the Tarmac Tuesdays pictures is perfect because it's a global celebration of tarmac. So all of these flags are based on different people's photos of tarmac. So that's like a pom-pom that had got lost with some like autumn leaves. This is Liz's, I think this was Liz's chart. Yeah, Liz charted this, and then I saw her leaves and went, oh, I could do her leaves and the pom-pom. And so it's quite collaborative. This was originally one of Muriel's knitted postcards, but I wrote to her and said, can we incorporate it in the bunting, because it's perfect. This is one of my favourite things. So this is where the painter was going. This is a photo taken by Vivienne, just this little bit on the flag, and she managed to capture this moment where the paint was going along the road and there was a leaf on the road and the paint marked the line, the leaf blew away, and there was this negative impression of like a plane tree or a poplar tree leaf just left there. So that now is commemorated in the bunting. Yeah, so there's this whole...
Do you have any with roadkill?
No roadkill. But there is a no soiling the, that's from Shetland. That's a no, don't allow the dog to foul the pavement sign, which I think is worthy of celebration in stranded colourwork. And so that's like the second project in the book. The third project in the book was sort of after I knitted the bricks in the first book. I was just really interested in this one motif that was really, it's a very simple 4-stitch wide repeat, and I kept reiterating it in different brick shades, and I thought, you know, this needs to be a cowl. So it's a cowl, and it comes with a whole, my chapter talks about how you can adopt that idea to wherever it is that you live. And then the fourth chapter, the whole time I was working on the first book, I had this purse which I bought from an Etsy seller who lives in Reading. And I just kept looking at it and thinking, I want to make stranded colourwork based on this. And it didn't make it into the first book. But in the second book, I just kept looking at it and I thought, how cool would it be to have, like, to mimic that idea of a purse, but to have, like, a phone case and then a mini tablet case and then a laptop case. Each of which, so... Playing with scale and proportion, that comes up in my workshops all the time, where people are like, well, the thing I'm going to make is this many stitches wide and my motif is this many stitches, how am I going to make it fit? So this pattern really just lets you scale up. Like, they've all got three rows of dolls and 2 rows of dots, and the dots and the dolls just get bigger and smaller according to the canvas. And it's very pleasing when you've got all your electronics in matchy Matryoshka dolls. And then the last chapter, the biggest chapter in the book, when I did the first book, I had a dandelion and on one of my swatches. And the thing about the dandelion, that I kept looking at that and thinking, that simple round kind of shape could be the dandelion in spring when it's got its little yellow petals, or it could also be when it becomes like a fluffy seed head. And so my quest became, how do I get from the yellow to the grey white? How am I going to do that in colours? And I kept swatching that, and I came up with this kind of scrappy swatch. And I decided what we need for knitting flowers is a really tall canvas that will let you explore all those permutations of colour. So I designed this shawl.
Lord. Holy crap.
And this shawl was knitted by my friend Tom. He did the sample knitting. He's an amazing knitter.
Holy shit.
And I realised, like, wow, this could be adopted to any kind of context. So
is the pattern for this available?
Yeah, it's in the book.
Oh, okay.
It's in the playbook. It's the last project in the book. So same maths, completely different motifs, lobelia flowers.
Holy crap.
And same maths, completely different palette and different shape motifs, but all plugging into the same kind of basic architectural framework. And that's Cherry Blossom, and I knitted that one. If I had been a bit more of a capitalist about this pattern, which is the last project in the playbook, I would have made 6 separate shawl patterns and listed them each as discrete projects on Ravelry, because on Ravelry it basically says there's 1 shawl pattern in the book, but there's 6 sets of charts, and although the maths and the underlying architecture is the same for each of these shawls, and there's 3 fictional shawls that have never been knitted, I've just worked out the charts for them and shared them in the book. Yeah, if I'd been more commercially minded about it, I would have put each of them up separately, because all the work is in finding how you transition between these different sections of the shawl, how you get the leaf shape to look like a leaf, how do you get from the dark green to the light green, all of that kind of shading and motif stuff. So that's a bit of a lesson for me, but what I really want to give people is a framework for creativity rather than tons of individual patterns that, yeah, that's just kind of the way I thought about it. And that's why I try and describe the playbook as having like these projects in it, because I think they're more than a pattern. Not to devalue the work that goes into making a pattern, but like the polka dots and dolls, it's really 3 differently sized cozies and a whole chapter about how to resize motifs, but it's listed as 1 pattern.
Yeah, but it's more like the teach a man to fish analogy, you know? Give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats forever. So that's actually really, really nice of you to do that.
Well, it's what I live for, is to empower other, like, it's to empower
people
through
to be
creativity.
Creative. Exactly.
And self-expression. And when
your 3rd book.
the 3rd book. Yeah, sort of the friend of the playbook.
Yeah.
Really, they're like little
companions.
Little companions to each other. What I've found through 2 things about swatching: you never know how 2 colours are going to look beside one another until you knit them. There's just no fast way to know, but you can get some of a sense by colouring in and finding pencils that are very close to the yarn shades, but it is a pain to chart each individual square within a pattern to see how it looks. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have the motifs set out in such a way that you can more quickly, and you can just get a kind of gist of how you want your colours to go when you're thinking about how you're going to sequence shades through your pattern. And the other thing is that when we think about translating everyday life into stranded colour work, we tend to think in a pictorial way, but it doesn't. What we're not good at doing, most of us, because of the way we learn to draw and the way we learn to see things, is to think in 2 channels, background and pattern. But that is absolutely key to the structure and how you think about stranded colour work. So all the way through here, I've made this like little dotted background that hopefully helps it to be very clear that one, like all the kind of blank stitches are the pattern, and all the slightly shaded stitches are the background. And I hope that that helps with working out how am I going to sequence colours through these 2 channels when I'm looking at my yarn shades and I'm looking at my chart. And then also I've just very simply tried to suggest the little curvy shape of a knitted stitch, because knitted stitches aren't a perfect, neat, concise square. And I think it helps you to visualise the end product. Yeah, if you can see it. So, like, this is the bricks cowl, and there's 19 sections on the bricks cowl, and this lets you get a overall impression of how the whole thing is going to look from a distance. But this lets you map out, should you so wish, each section exactly what colours you're going to use, if you're that kind of a planner. And everyone has different learning styles, and also it's just nice to be able to get a very rough idea of how your stranded colourwork project is going to look from a distance, which is how someone's going to see it. Because when we're knitting, we're looking at it like this, but when it's out in the world, it kind of sits in a different proportion. So I've got these small sketchy drawings that just let you get an overall impression of the finished project, and then these more detailed drawings that let you really get into the nitty gritty of how am I going to shade my background and pattern yarn. So I really wanted it to be practical, supportive colouring book.
So how amazing was that, right? And like I said, there's no category for Felix. She does so many things, and she's such an amazing person that, yeah, I'm still gonna come up with one eventually, but not right now. There is a second part to this story, and you'll see that in the next episode. And in it, she's also going to give away some of her books, the Stranded Colourwork books. Absolutely amazing books, like mind-blowing, okay? You don't want to miss out on that. And to make sure you don't miss out on that, just subscribe below and ring the bell so you get the notifications of when I put out a new episode. Every 10 to 14 days, okay? Now, we have some stuff to clear up with regards to the giveaways. Speaking of giveaways, in the last episode, you'll remember that, well, if you watched it, and if you didn't, you should. I gave away the Erin Lane bag to Sandy. Now, as it turns out, Sandy actually didn't win the Erin Lane bag. She won the shawl from Apple Yarns. The shawl kit where she gets the pattern of the shawl and the yarn from Apple Yarns. So I've corrected that mistake with Sandy and with Andrea, and that's all taken care of. Now the good news is that it means somebody else gets to win that Erin Lane bag, okay? And that person is Valerie Fisher. So Valerie, I'll be contacting you right away to get your contact information, your shipping information, and I will get that bag out to you right away. Congratulations, and thank you for watching the show and for sharing that post with your friends. Okay. Now, I'm also giving away something else. If you remember in episode, I believe it was in episode 1, we had 2 giveaways in episode 1. We had one by Carolyn Dick, and we had one by Black Cat Custom Yarns. Now, through my oversight, I had forgotten about the one by Black Cat Custom Yarns, so I'm really, really sorry. However, Brenda Fender, you for you. Brenda, you've won 2 skeins of yarn from Black Cat Custom Yarns. So I will be connecting you with them. You'll get to pick 2 skeins of their yarn in any of their bases, in any of their 180 some odd colorways, because we've had Knit City, so there were some more introduced to there, so their total might be close to 200 by now. Okay, so Brenda, you've won that. Congratulations again. Thank you so much. If you haven't won, if you didn't win, or if you haven't won yet, don't worry. I mean, lots more giveaways in the future, and lots more opportunities. Okay. Now, I would love for you, if you can, to share this with your friends. If you like this episode, please do click on the like. Even better yet, just subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you get notifications whenever I put out a new episode. Again, every 10 to 14 days. Okay? Also, if you're able to, I have a Patreon page. If you're able to help support me with this venture and continue on this journey with me, it'd be fantastic. Just check out the Patreon page, and yeah, anything you're able to help with is greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. Okay, so that's it for now. Well, for another 10 days anyway. And in the next episode, don't worry, we will be seeing Felix. The second part of that, we'll have a new segment, our Knitflix segment. What's that all about, you say? Well, make sure you watch and you find out. And we'll have something else for you to learn on KnitU. Okay? I love it that you're here. Thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate your love. Share this with your friends, like it, and we'll see you again soon. Okay? Bye. Holy shit! Mark's gonna come down, you know this, right? I wanna know what love is.
I wanna know what love is. I want you to show me. I wanna know what love is. I want you to. I don't know the words.
Yeah, we need Julie. And what's knit night like here usually?
Busy, really busy, full of again all sorts of people, but like lots of regulars who come back all the time. But it's just really welcoming. And
And what do you
anyone
think
can
is the
drop in.
attraction or the draw of yarn that makes people want to come together like this? And it's a beautiful summer evening, really nice and warm outside.
Yeah.
And yet you've got a shop full of people sitting together and knitting.
I think probably just the social aspect, like a lot of people, it gets them out of the house and like they can come and chat about whatever they want and be making, but at the same time you have something to be working on. If you don't want to get involved in the conversation or whatever, you can just sit and do your knitting. Which is really